Now, Asia is reeling from one of the deadliest floods in recent memory. At least about 1,200 people have lost their lives across Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia after back-to-back cyclones and relentless rains that have triggered catastrophic flooding. The floodwater has reportedly started receding, but the humanitarian crisis has only just begun for people in these countries. Now, hundreds of thousands of people are stranded in shelters without adequate access to clean drinking water, food or medical supplies, including in Sri Lanka, which has been battered by cyclonic storm Ditwa. In view of this, India has launched a massive relief mission under Operation Sagar Bandhu. Two Indian naval ships, the INS Vikrant and INS Udayagiri, already in Colombo for the Sri Lankan Navy's 75th anniversary, shifted from ceremonial duty to emergency deployment. And both vessels rushed large consignments of essential supplies to the worst affected regions, while naval helicopters carried out aerial reconnaissance and then joined the ongoing search and rescue missions, helping rescue the stranded Sri Lankans. To strengthen relief work further, the Indian Navy's INS Sukanya has now docked at the northern Sri Lankan city of Trincomalee with additional critical aid. Officials have confirmed coordination between New Delhi and Colombo remains continuous to speed up deliveries. The Indian Navy has said that its rapid mobilization reinforces its position as the first responder in the Indian Ocean region and reflects India's commitment to stand firmly with neighbors under the Mahasagar vision and the Neighborhood First policy. In a separate humanitarian gesture, India has also granted overflight clearance to a Pakistani relief aircraft carrying aid to Sri Lanka. And Pakistan has filed a request and India has approved it the same day within 4 hours. The decision, the officials emphasized, was based solely on humanitarian grounds despite the direct overflight routes between the two nations remaining shut following heightened tensions earlier this year after the Pahalgam terror attack and also India's Operation Sindoor. The Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued a statement to the contrary, alleging delays on India's part in processing additional flight clearance for a Pakistani aircraft, further alleging that India continues to block humanitarian assistance from Pakistan to Sri Lanka. India, though, has firmly rejected Pakistan's claims. The Ministry of External Affairs in a statement has said that they rejected Pakistan's ridiculous statement, stating that is another attempt of spreading what is known as anti-India information, while also simultaneously confirming Pakistan's request to use India's airspace for humanitarian assistance to Sri Lanka has been expedited. Now, across Indonesia, the residents are beginning to assess the scale of the devastation in the country's northern part of Sumatra. Residents waded through thick mud as they began cleaning up of what remained of their homes and businesses. The destruction follows days of relentless flooding that officials say has killed at least 700 people, with hundreds more still missing and thousands who remain displaced.
Tahu bagaimana caranya, makanya Pak kami minta tolong sama Bapak supaya kami bisa dibantu cara kayak mana betulin rumah kami ini Pak, supaya kami bisa tempat tidur lagi Pak.
Communications in several Indonesian regions remain down. Power is still being restored. Road access has been blocked by landslides, forcing rescue teams to rely on helicopters and airlifts. Southern Thailand continues to grapple with the flooding disaster that authorities say is the worst in decades. The Thai military has in fact deployed helicopters, boats and specialized units, but the terrain and limited equipment have reportedly slowed further rescue efforts. The strong currents, collapsed bridges and submerged roads have left parts of the region inaccessible across the country. Nearly 2.7 million people across almost 1 million households have been affected. The focus remains on the people of the flood-hit countries across Asia, families who've lost everything and now depend on emergency aid to survive, with more rain predicted in several parts ravaged by floods in the coming days. The authorities have warned that the disaster is far from over. All right, let's now get you some updates from India, where India's Border Security Force has issued some fresh warnings about terror activity across the border in Pakistan. The BSF has said that Islamabad has again reactivated more than 70 terror launch pads in its territory. On Monday, the Inspector General for BSF's Kashmir frontier, Ashok Yadav, said that nearly about 69 terror launch pads were active along the line of control. And he said that over 100 terrorists are currently biding their time there.
Our G unit is keeping a close watch on all the 69 active launching pads along the LOC, where around 100 to 120 terrorists have been waiting to infiltrate.
In a separate statement, the BSF's Deputy Inspector General Vikram Kunwar said that 72 terror launch pads have been activated. He said that 60 were actually beyond the LOC and 12 were across the international border in Pakistan's Sialkot and Zafarwal areas. And according to the BSF, each launch pad usually harbors anywhere from 2 to 3 terrorists, and they look for opportunities to cross the LOC or the border and to wreak havoc in India. Initially, in the wake of Operation Sindoor, Pakistan had reportedly moved its terror launch pads further away from the border with India.
The damage we had caused to launching pads of terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir frontier, we have intelligence inputs which indicate that some of the launching pads have been moved from the forward areas to different locations so that they are not in the firing range.
However, the reactivation of the terror launch pads has India's security forces on high alert. The BSF DIG Vikram Kunwar has now said that for Islamabad, old habits die really hard. And the BSF is saying that it is ready for any kind of military misadventurism from Pakistan. Amidst its worsening standoff with China, Japan is now preparing to send missiles to the Philippines. According to reports in the Japanese media, the move could mark one of Japan's most far-reaching defense exports since it imposed some strict weapons transfer rules decades ago. The missiles reportedly under consideration are Japan's Type 3 medium-range surface-to-air missiles, the same one that Japan plans to deploy on its Yonaguni Island that is located just 110 kilometers from Taiwan. China has already called the deployment to be extremely dangerous, and with this latest development, Japan is also taking a step that could further irritate Beijing. Japan has reportedly held informal talks with Manila, and a formal study of the exports will begin once Tokyo scraps its restrictions on defense equipment sales. A policy change is expected sometime next year. The Type 3 missile is a truck-mounted air defense system that has a range of about 50 kilometers. It is designed to intercept aircraft and cruise missiles, and Philippine officials have already expressed interest in acquiring it. Separately, the potential sale comes as Manila is facing growing pressure from the Chinese forces in the South China Sea and sits on the first island chain just 140 kilometers from Taiwan. All of this is happening as Tokyo is moving to rewrite its 3 principles on defense exports, rules that have heavily restricted weapon sales since at least 1967. The current guidelines allow only 5 categories of defense equipment to be exported. That is rescue, transport, warning, surveillance and mine sweeping. But Japan has been steadily expanding its military role. In October, the newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Sane Takaichi had said that she will raise the defense spending to 2% of the Japanese GDP by as early as March next year. That is 2 years ahead of schedule. And Tokyo and Manila have also deepened their military ties. A new defense pact now allows the Japanese troops to deploy in the Philippines. For the first time since the end of the Second World War, the 2 nations have already held joint military drills with the United States, including a 5-day exercise in Cebu. And this has got China very worried, with Beijing repeatedly warning against Japan's growing military footprint in the region. Remember last month we told you as to how Tokyo's deployment of the Type 3 missile in Yonaguni and the export of the Patriot interceptors to the United States had irked Beijing, with China calling both moves to be extremely dangerous for many years. Now, Beijing has accused Japan's right wing of trying to abandon its pacifist constitution and to build a more assertive military. The prospect of missile exports to the Philippines is likely to intensify the frayed tensions.